A preamble for the essay on fear. In today's world, we identify a variety of primary emotions and many shades of them. We even lay out an emotion wheel, like a color wheel, and sometimes bend the wheel into a cone to model both the quality and quantity of emotion. And like the color wheel, there are basically two forms of emotion, just as there are warm and cool colors. The emotions of approach, attraction, and the emotions of avoidance, rejection. This is how we live, how life has always functioned. We try to move toward objects and situations that benefit the living condition and try to move away from or remove objects and situations that endanger the living condition. The rest is enigmatic detail. The primary emotion of approach is the feeling of well-being. The primary emotion of avoidance is fear. And just as successfully negotiating the emotions of approach can morph into whole varieties of related feelings, situations that first and foremost begin with fear tumble through a number of related states depending on how events progress. While there is much talk today about anger motivating especially political movements, we must understand that anger is an expressed manifestation of fear. Fear avoidance is primary. Human bodies do not bring the whole profusion of emotional states into the world. Rather, we bring relatively simple patterns of motivated approach and avoidance to the whole complex of modern life. It is these complexities that design and organize our basic emotional simplicities into the many patterns of emotional expression exhibited today. Emotions have always been the interaction of a few physiological states with a variety of environmental events. The formation and maintenance of emotional states without immediate and clear environmental reference is at base destructive and pathological. The essay, Fear as Adaptive Device and Political Instrument. There is slow fear and there is fast fear. There is unforeseen fear and there is strategic fear. Yet all move in the body and the mind similarly through the basic design of this physiological emotional state. Fear is simply an organizing force and design of the body. Mental processes and community expectations form our response. Danger that comes with no premonition only has consequences and no present reality. A floor collapses from under you, and you control your fall as best you can. Fear comes later. Slow fear and fast fear are part of our evolutionary history. Dangerous animals, plants, and situations are in the nature of the world. Dangerous meaning that animals and plants are either adept at protecting themselves or are adept as predators, and that physical forces like gravity or lightning can create harmful situations. Slow fear mediated caution, and fast fear organized immediate personal and social action, importantly, almost always in response to real dangers. Unforeseen fear and strategic fear, fear planned by others for strategic purposes, are largely new, meaning that these sources of physiological fear states are not a significant part of the evolution of the fear response. Having a deep and intimate knowledge of one's environment and the highly probable patterns of life obviates unforeseen fear. And the all-for-one, one-for-all adaptive structure of hominin tribal communities greatly limited strategic fear as a social device. Fears formed from recognizable environmental sources have increasingly been replaced by undefined fears. There are fewer occasions today of environmentally perceived slow fears organizing caution within a community. Rather, amorphous fears predominate very often with no meaningful action seen as effective. And today's world most often leaves us unprepared for fast fears, which have few predictable sources and few appropriate responses in our daily experience. Often the most effective response is to be unafraid, not an especially natural response. All we have to fear is fear itself, is a clever rhetorical phrasing, but not informing as to how it is accomplished. A major consequence of this is that fear has gotten a bad name. Environmentally based, slow and fast fears are perfectly fine emotions, tuned to the conditions and occasions of normal life. This is so true that many people would not even call much of what is motivated by fear in these organizing forms as fear at all. More and more today, the idea of and the word fear is restricted to the unnatural fears, unforeseen and strategic. We are afraid of what we do not know, what we cannot see coming, and what we are told to be afraid of. Just how unhealthy this is for individuals and societies is increasingly clear. Physiologically, fear is not designed to be a constant condition, but rather a transitional state that motivates action and thus dissipates the fear response through adaptive behaviors. 2 examples. First, slow fear. I learned as a small child to walk in the swamps and palmetto pine barrens of central Florida with great caution. There be dangerous snakes in remarkable abundance. And yet, I and my friends walked and played there with ease. A tiny rush of cautionary fear would color the moment if the ground could not be seen ahead of the next step forward, and immediately and completely dissipated when a palm leaf was moved or other action was taken to disclose the area around the advancing footfall. And fast fear. I once surprised a sleeping mountain lion in the New Mexico wilds, both of us on foot. The quality of my attention and speed of thought was pushed up at least an order of magnitude for the half an hour or so that the lion and I played primal tag through the juniper pinyon woodlands. By the time it quit following me, when the ground cover became more open, I was spent. All that was left was exhilaration. I had not felt any emotion that I had previously known by the name of fear. Unforeseen fears are things like random acts of violence, for which no meaningful precautions can be taken. It is especially these fears that are useful strategically. The essence of strategic fear is not that nothing can be done, but that you can do nothing, while some other can mitigate the danger. This is a most unnatural condition. Living things have always had the tools to take on environmental realities, individually or as social collectives, and when in social collectives, individuals were full partners in response to the dangers. Unforeseen and strategic fear perverts this billion-year-old reality. The essence, therefore, of strategic fear is the separation of individuals from the information needed to evaluate and prepare for dangers. This allows 2 options to those who position themselves to use the fear response of others for their advantage. The first is to control information about real situations, and the second is to manufacture dangers that do not exist in reality. There is simply no natural reason that the realities of the situations that we face cannot be made clear to all the participants in society. The only reason is that strategic fear is so useful to a select few. But today, people very often cannot react individually or as communities on the actual slow and fast fears that face us. Such has become the design of our institutions and societies. While our experience of life in the present world says otherwise, human societies are very unnatural structures. We talk of nations, religions, megacorporations, and other vast collectives as though they have substantial existence and understandable definition. They do not. Another of the many paradoxes that attend our present realities. The bigger and more complex the structure of our organization, the simpler and more primal and less generally adaptive must be the principles holding these organizations together. The less full human expression and experience can be manifest in them. These large collectives are organized around single emotional behavioral states like greed, fear, and illusory well-being. Whole societies can be characterized by the primary emotion of their structure. It would seem that this should make social collectives understandable and give them substance, but no. Each individual unit, the human animal that makes them up, has all the complexities of the evolved species and thus is both diminished by the acts that fit them into their society and floundering in their struggles with the unavoidable demands of their biological complexity. Ultimately, a huge collective must adapt to being organized around some powerful biological emotional element that has predictable consequences on the collective's participants. That emotion is almost always fear. Almost all large-scale social organizations have adopted fear as a central principle. This has been going on for a very long time, for as long as human social collectives have been numbered in the thousands or more. Fear-based social organization is so ubiquitous, and our projections of fear-based processes onto the world beyond the social is so complete that it is almost impossible to recognize another option. Well-being, of course, is the other option, but well-being is based in a gestalt of needs satisfied. The structural principles are diametrically antithetical to fear-based societies. There is no paradigm of transition from fear to well-being in the structure of large collectives, even though these two conditions were completely mutual supporting in their origins. How to deconstruct, then reconstruct these relationships and apply them to larger social organizations than the tribal communities of our origins will be the measure of our future as a species. First, fear-based societies. How is a fear-based society recognized? It is simple. Make a list of what you're afraid of. Here's a sample. Crime, being cheated, losing a job, being slandered, being devalued, the power of authority, police, taxing agencies, other drivers on the road, the anger, really the fear of others, disease, costs of medical and legal services, lack of accurate information, strangers, the enemy, loss of freedom, economic and social collapse, people who believe differently, people who don't like you, environmental collapse, random violence, sexual perversion, God's wrath, the elderly, the young, the future, and all the specifics and variations that can be made of these. Such societies tend to have a fear du jour. The habit of fear makes this a simple process. In fact, without a fear of the day, the free-floating fear state would not have a ready reference and could become dangerous to the economic and political elites that use fear as a controlling principle, since the focus of national anxiety might turn on the actual and easily observable dangerous actions of the oligarchs. Now make a list of how society supports your sense of well-being. This is a more difficult list. Don't let it be only a list of how fears are limited or relieved. Here is a hypothetical example. My neighbors and I share resources so that no one is forced to face dangers alone. I can express my ideas and concerns freely, knowing that I will be heard with respect. The principles and forces of social order are designed to respond to my interests, not to enforce my obedience to some arbitrary standards. Since we live in a fear-based society, these are more wishes than statements of condition. I leave it to the reader to fill in specific examples of how the fence lines and corrals of fear control daily movements and actions for both themselves and for the subcommunities in which they are a part. But these will most likely involve money, credit, social prestige, loss of material standards of living, militarized authority, and an amorphous physical fear of the desires and powers attributed to others beyond our immediate experience. The present nature of a sense of well-being will come from close association with trusted friends and from illusions of protection supplied by religious and related pathologies. In modern societies, only human action seems significant. Biophysical processes are seen, if they are realized at all, as unquestioned substrate conditions upon which real life just occurs or as inconveniences to be overcome. This is amplified by the fact that many real dangers do come from the effects of our human numbers, the design of our economics, and vast influences of our technologies. But even though these dangers are certainly real, the use of strategic fear by the economic and politically powerful has been to increase them rather than to diminish them. In other words, the fears of the general society are used to make societies appear more dangerous rather than less. This last has been, until now, very difficult to see from the position of the so-called middle-class societies of North America and Europe. These centers of illusory well-being are organized around the relief of fear not genuine well-being. And we are beginning to see how easily transition is made to the direct use of fear in those societies as the powerful move to globalized control of population and resources. In today's world, there are primarily two real dangers to fear and to act on in the natural pattern of this essential emotion. One, the disruption of the biophysical systems that allow complex life to exist. And two, the insanity of a power elite that works assiduously to maintain their authority and their incredible excesses of resource use. The plethora of dangers we are told to fear, the fears du jour, focus our attentions in the wrong direction with purpose. But the nakedness of the attempts to control and redirect attention using fear will only become more and more obvious as the actual dangers become more and more real. We must find our sense of real well-being in supportive community, refuse the strategic fears delivered to control us, and realize the real dangers from the impunity of the oligarchy and the destruction of environment, realizing how much the two are closely connected.